I used to think the heart quieted with age, that once your children were grown, once the rhythm of your days settled, feelings like longing or awakening would soften into something gentle, predictable. I believed that for years. Maybe I needed to believe it. Life feels simpler when you pretend you're finished changing. But everything shifted the night Daniel arrived at my door. He was my daughter's husband. A good man, steady, thoughtful, always trying to carry more than he should. I had known him for years as family, someone I spoke to over dinners and holidays, someone who always tried to help more than he needed to. To me, he had always been part of my daughter's world, not mine. But that evening, something was different. Maybe it was the way the rain clung to him when he stepped inside, dripping down his jacket as if he had walked through a storm far heavier than the one outside. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, tired, searching, quietly hurting in a way he didn't know how to hide. He told me my daughter had flown out early for a last-minute work commitment and that the house had felt too empty. He didn't want to be alone. His voice cracked on that last part, almost too soft to hear. I nodded and stepped aside, letting him in, feeling something tug inside me. Concern, of course, but also that deeper ache that comes when you care for someone without realizing it. We sat in the living room, the lamps low, the rain tapping gently against the windows. He wrapped his hands around the mug of tea I gave him, as if holding something warm kept him steady. He didn't speak much at first. We didn't need words. The silence between us felt strangely comfortable, as though we'd been sharing quiet moments like this for years without noticing. Finally, he exhaled and said, "I don't know why I came here instead of calling a friend." I smiled softly. "Maybe you needed a place that felt familiar." He shook his head. "It's more than that." When he looked up at me, his eyes softened in a way that made my breath catch, not inappropriate, not crossing anything, just open, honest. As if he trusted me enough to let every layer fall away. That look stayed with me. I reminded myself gently that emotions can appear in strange hours, especially on lonely nights. Still, I couldn't deny the warmth that spread through me, the kind that wasn't simply motherly or friendly. It was deeper, quieter, like being truly seen. We talked for a long time, about life, about the feeling of trying so hard to be enough, about the quiet fatigue that settles in when no one asks how you're doing because they assume you're strong. I told him things I hadn't said aloud in years, how the house felt too still sometimes, how I missed being someone's safe place, how I still had parts of myself I hadn't figured out. He listened with his full attention, not politely, but deeply, as if every word mattered. The rain eventually slowed, and the house settled around us with that soft nighttime hum that always made me feel strangely peaceful. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said quietly. "You've always seemed so collected." "Collected doesn't mean untouched," I murmured. His eyes lowered to the mug in his hands, as if he were holding more than just warm tea. "You make things feel lighter," he said. "Just being here." It was a simple statement, but something in his voice, gentle, sincere, moved through me like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. And then came the moment, the one that changed everything, not by crossing any lines, but by revealing the ones we'd never acknowledged. He reached out, hesitantly at first, fingers brushing the back of my hand. A small gesture. A safe one. But the warmth of that touch felt like a truth we'd both been quietly carrying without naming. I didn't pull away. Not because of desire, or confusion, or anything reckless. It was something far calmer, far more human, the simple comfort of connection between two people who felt unseen in different ways. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're allowed to feel." His shoulders eased, and for a moment, it felt like the world stilled around us. The soft glow of the lamp, the faint scent of rain, the quiet understanding in the air. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that crossed any boundary. Just a shared moment of being understood. He let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "I didn't expect to talk like this tonight," he said. Neither did I. We sat there with our hands gently touching, not holding, just resting, like two people finding steadiness in the presence of another. I felt something warm settle in my chest, not dangerous, not forbidden, just real. Eventually, he leaned back, giving me a grateful look. "Thank you," he said softly. "For being here. For listening. For everything." "You don't have to thank me," I replied. "Sometimes people just need somewhere to breathe." He nodded slowly, as though letting that truth sink into places inside him that had been tight for too long. The night stretched on, gentle and calm. When he finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped completely, the sky clearer than before. He glanced at me before stepping out the door, his voice low and sincere. "You made tonight feel different," he said. Different. Not wrong. Not complicated. Just different. I walked him to the doorway, wishing him a safe drive home. As he stepped into the quiet night, he looked back at me with a softness I hadn't seen before, not romantic, not misplaced, but deeply grateful. And that gratitude touched me more than anything else. After the door closed, I stood there for a long while, listening to the quiet house. Something inside me felt awakened, not by romance, not by desire, but by the simple truth that even in the middle of life, even after years of believing emotions settle, the heart can still surprise you. It wasn't love. Not in the way stories usually frame it. It wasn't something that broke rules or crossed lines. It was something gentler. Two people finding a moment of honest connection in a world that too often asks us to hide the softer parts of ourselves. And yet, that night stayed with me. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. Because sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones where nothing is said aloud, nothing is acted on, yet everything is felt in the quiet spaces between words. Daniel and I never spoke of that evening again. Life carried on, the way it tends to. But every now and then, when our paths crossed during family gatherings or quiet afternoons, he'd give me that small, grateful smile, warm, steady, familiar, and I'd feel that same gentle reminder. We are never too old to discover new layers within ourselves. We are never too old to be moved by someone's presence. And we are never too old to feel the quiet, grounding power of being understood. Even if the moment lasts just one rain-soaked evening. Even if no one else ever knows. Even if it exists only in the soft memory of two hearts that needed a place to breathe.